So we want to welcome you to this introductory talk about how we work with shamanism.
And here we are.
Mm-hmm.
Here we are.
Mm.
And yeah, very often people have been asking me over the years, what is shamanism? And I never really know quite how to start. But one thing shamanism is, it's about connection. It's about connection. And it's about connection to everything. And I know that sounds like a lot, but then the shamanism is a lot. And the foundation of shamanism is an understanding of the universe that's called animism, that everything that exists has a spirit. And what the shaman knows is how to get in touch with the spirits of the universe. And I don't know of any shaman who can get in touch with all the spirits of the universe. I never heard about that. But I remember one time seeing a documentary film about a Nepalese shaman. I believe he had 438 spirit connections, and he had to name them all before he started any piece of work. And he was very well connected. But you don't need to have 438. You only need one. And the shaman works by asking for help. This is the bottom line. Because the shaman does not work solo. The shaman works, as I started off by saying, in connection with the world around him or her. Yeah. In fact, I should always say her, because most of the people who come on our courses and retreats, generally they're more women than men.
Depends, yeah.
One or two times we've had more guys, yeah.
And so one of the things we're going to talk about, well, one of the things we're going to talk about today, the main thing we're going to talk about is how we work with the spirits. There are so many different traditions of shamanism in the world. And in some shamanic traditions, they don't use the word shaman or shamanism. And to some extent, it's also being aware of like, who are we talking about and who are we talking from? And is it anthropologists who are talking about the shamans, or is it themselves? So that's a good thing when you're reading about shamanism to be aware of. And many times the shamans decide what they want to show and not show. And sometimes the anthropologists don't really know how to look at a ceremony, how to see a ceremony. And so they might see the surface of it, but they might not see the deeper invisible layers. And for me, working with the spirits is all about that. It's all about learning to work beyond the physical, beyond what we see with our eyes, that which is not visible to us otherwise. And this for me means that I engaged with the world, as you said, as a living being, but I also engage with the world as more than matter, as both spirit and matter. And that means that whatever I do, if I'm cooking or gardening or singing or talking to my mom, I'm always aware that there is more than the physical side. And there's more to a situation that I might see on the surface. And so one of the things that the spirits can help us with is to learn to see with their eyes. And this is a sort of a big thing that we're going to talk about, and a little bit more about how to do that.
So I guess that's a cue for me to talk about how we do that.
If you want.
Okay, this is there are also a lot of traditional ways for doing this, and I guess the most talked about now is the use of psychotropic plants, and yeah, and traditionally people have used psychotropic plants all around the world, but not exclusively at all. In many parts of the world, people had other ways of making this shift in consciousness so that they became very aware in a first-hand kind of way of the spirit world being with them and around them. And a lot of you I know are also aware of using rhythmic drumming to make this shift in consciousness. And also there's dancing and singing. Some people go out in the woods for a while and spend time out there, and other people fast. There are many, many different ways of getting in touch with the spirit world. But one of the requirements is intention. What is your intention? And very often the shaman's initiation to the spirit world happens spontaneously. Reading the ethnographies from around the world, and the shamans talking about their first experiences with the spirits. Very often these happen spontaneously. It could be during a ritual, or it could be when they were walking through the woods hunting. And then what happens after that is that if they wish to pursue this, or if their spirit connections tell them to pursue this, they then find an older shaman, a mentor, who will teach them. Will teach them partly from the traditions of the culture, and partly by getting the young initiate to pay attention to what the spirits are saying, because the real teachers are in the spirit world.
And I want to talk a little bit about what shamanism might be in a so-called modern context in a society that is so-called developed materially, and it really has a place. I feel now it has a place more than ever. For me, where I live here in Sweden, I'm born in Sweden, and then I lived in Britain for a very long time, 30 years. And then I came back to Sweden 13 years ago. And much of the surface of life in the society that I have been living in is very focused on the physical, on matter, on what things look like, and working with that rather than working what's behind it. And so because of the way that the world is now increasingly in a dire strait, both environmentally but also for humans, a lot of people we meet have a lot of what we call soul loss. That they're not quite here. They feel that parts of themselves haven't either haven't arrived fully or have left, because this is not really a society or a culture that it's easy to live in if you want to live in this ensouled way, where you want to be fully alive in both your body and your spirit and your soul and your mind, all these beautiful things together. And so living for traditional shamans, they lived in a culture and a community that understood what they were doing and how they were living. They understood the role of that work in the community and the function and the importance of it and the value of it. For us, for many of us here now, we live in a society that doesn't understand it, doesn't value it, and doesn't recognize it. And so for me, it's very much about bridging the gap, or rather building a bridge, between who I really am inside, how I want to live, and how that is possible out in the world. So when I go to my job, or when I go to my family, I don't have to be someone else. I am still myself. And a lot of what I want to talk more about today is, for me, it's not so important. When we have people come on introductory courses, sometimes people ask, will I be a shaman now after the end of the course? And I remember we were in Hungary many years ago, and sharing a car with another friend going out to the venue to do a course. And she said, do you really think we need to train all these shamans in the world? And it was quite a long time ago, 10 years, I think. And now I'd say yes, for sure, even more so. But what we were talking about was that it's not really about training people to become shamans. That's sort of something else. That's a pretty long and often arduous path that you either get chosen for or you choose it. And it's a really big choice. And I feel, particularly here in the so-called West, we're very keen to build identity, partly because I feel we do suffer so much soul loss. So for me, it's become much more clear in the last few years that it's not about being a shaman. It's not about becoming a shaman. It's about living a shamanic life. It's not about who I am. It's about how I live. And that also takes the pressure off. It takes the focus off me. It's not about whether I'm a great shaman or not. It's how I live. It's how I live in connection. It's how I live in relationship with the living world. And that for me is the absolute focus all the time of shamanic work. How do I live in a world that's alive and open to both matter and spirit?
Yes, this is really the essence of it. And I've been teaching for almost 35 years now, and my life has changed entirely. Well, almost entirely. I'm still the same old me, but things have changed. Things have really changed. And this is what happens when you step onto a path of power, because that's what shamanism is. It is a path, a life path. It's a life path of power. And what the shaman, as I said in the beginning, does is to connect to the power. And the power will change you. The power will test you. And sometimes you might not pass the test. And so then you get tested again. And I once heard of a man who said, I've never made a mistake in my life. I thought, this is an outrageous statement. He said, well, I learned the first time I do something which other people consider to be wrong, and maybe I consider to be wrong, but I learn, and so I don't do it again. Very powerful guy. Sometimes I've gotten thrown into the tar pit more than once before I learn. And I think this is probably true for most of us here. But still, what happens is that you step onto this path of power and you've got no choice but to change. And power is a word which is really scary for a lot of people. And I think the main reason is that many of us have experienced being on the wrong end of power. That is, being subjugated by other people who have more power. And in Swedish and Danish, and I guess German and Norwegian also, and many other languages, there are two words for power. And in Danish and Swedish, the words are makt, which is the power over, controlling power, and kraft, which is the lifting power, the illuminating power. And when you start working with power, you are tested. And there's this very old, wonderful saying that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, as we are seeing with some of the world's politicians today. That's not our business right now. Our business is right here and right now. And all of us are born with power. And all of us have access to power. And the practice of shamanism, as we work with it, is about how to access power and then what to do with it.
I want to add a little bit this idea of being tested by your spirits once you actually are in a relationship with them. And we'll come back to how you begin the relationship with them. And as we said, there are many different traditions and many different types of relationships. And what I found personally is that my relationship with my spirits deepen all the time through the work. It's by doing the work that I learn. I'm not perfect before. I don't have to wait to be perfect. There are some things you don't want to do too early with some healing work and ceremonial work. But in general, just beginning to create a personal connection for you and your spirit so that you can be more alive and more here, and that your soul can be more here. That's something that everybody can do. And then in my time on my shamanic path, I found that about 4, maybe even 5 times now, it comes round in a circle. And suddenly they'll take me back to the beginning. And the first time it happened, it was really very strange because I suddenly felt like I lost all connection for several months, like 2 or 3 months. And I didn't understand what was going on. And I thought I had just lost everything. And my whole foundation had gone. And this was nothing to do with teaching or working for other people. It was about my own personal connection. And then because I worked through it together with my spirits and getting help from other people who are experienced, I came to realize that it was them taking me through into another phase. It was them saying, okay, now you've gone round once the cycle with us. Now we want to teach you how to work a little bit more different. And then once I opened to that and stopped kind of freaking out, then they took me around, and then our relationship deepened again because they started teaching me other ways of working, not completely differently, but details and nuances. And then that's happened about 3 or 4 times after that, like I say. And it's wonderful because it keeps me really connected to the idea that it's a fluid relationship that's always developing. Like I said in the beginning, wherever we are, we can always change and grow and learn more. And this for me is a really great joy with the work. And I just want to say this one thing, what I felt personally in my experience is that the spirits are not actually trying to test me. Well, they are, but I decided to not use that word test. I decided to use the word training opportunity. That they are very kind, giving me a training opportunity to practice what they've been teaching me. And so maybe I have done a piece of work for myself, and I've asked for help, or I've asked for teachings, instructions, guidance, and they give it to me. And then in the following week, 2 weeks, 2 months, they give me training opportunities to see, have I listened? Have I remembered? Have I learned? And actually it's not to test me, it's to just help me like really go into the new phase. And so if there are so many different ways to respond to what's happening around us. And if we know that the spirits also have our best interests at heart, which mine definitely do. I really trust them more than I trust myself. then I know that they're always trying to teach me something. They're always trying to show me something. And this is a really wonderful thing. And I want to say as well, just before we go on, is some people I've noticed after working with the spirits for quite a few years, they stop doing work for themselves. They just do work for other people. But for me and for both of us, we just love this idea that our relationship with the spirits are always deepening and they're always teaching us more.
Yes, and that is absolutely sure. And for me, I really love spending time with my spirits. And I remember one time years ago, I have I have a teacher, a mentor, a teacher in the spirit world, and he really freaked me out one time. Well, many times, but one time especially. And he said to me, because I was complaining about my father, right? There I was, 50-year-old adolescent, complaining about my father. And he looked at me, my teacher, and he said, your father is not your father. And, like well, that was a very direct um, comment about my mother, I felt, and I got quite upset, and I said, "What do you mean?" And he looked at me and he said, "I am your father." And those few words just took our relationship to a whole different level. And I really came to feel what the word father means. And these are the deep teachings that we can receive from the spirits. And there are a lot of other teachings. And my feeling is, as I was saying a little while ago, is that uh, when we're born, we are born powerful. But the kind of power that we're born with is not so well acquainted with the world that we're born into. And what can happen for a lot of people is that in the course of growing up, a lot of very well meaning people start telling them about how the world is put together. And everybody's got a different story. And what happens is that as time goes on, we get further and further away from our true power. And this is the beauty of the initiatory experience, because all of a sudden it re-empowers us. It re-empowers us. And all of a sudden we feel at home on the earth. And teaching these courses over the years, I've had a lot of people come who do not feel at home, who do not feel at home. And I've had a lot of people say to me after an introductory weekend, I feel like I've come home. I've heard that hundreds of times, literally. And I know what it's all about because I felt that way too when I came back into contact with the spirits. And for me, my initiation, just to show you that it can happen anywhere at any time, happened in a university library when I read an article, an assigned article about a shaman. This was after 6 years in university. And I read this article and I closed the book. And I don't know if I screamed out loud, but it felt like I did. This is why I've been coming to the university for 6 years. because all of a sudden I knew what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I just had to find out how to do it.
And you tell the story that you came to shamanism not really because you wanted to be a shaman or teach or anything. You came because you felt like a leaf in the wind.
Exactly. If any of you have been to the university for 6 years in a row, then you might know that feeling too.
But also in your life.
In my
general.
life and
Yeah.
my life in general, everything was falling apart, and I felt like I had no control, which actually is a very healthy way to feel every once in a while. But it wasn't healthy living in the middle of New York City. And so that initiation came exactly in time for me.
And you spent many years just working for yourself.
Working for myself and trying to learn how to work together with the spirit world in a disciplined way. And those first 10 years were very undisciplined because I had no idea what the discipline should be. There was nobody teaching courses in shamanism at that time.
Long time ago.
Long time ago. Long time ago. Almost 50 years ago. Yeah.
And there's a question here from Zara Waldebäck. How do you know that the spirits you're in contact with guide you in the right direction? And this is a wonderful question. And I want to say a little bit about that from my perspective, and then you can say a bit what you think too. And so for me, there are several ingredients, shall we say, to when you begin to work with the spirits. And Jonathan was just talking about working with the spirits in what we call a disciplined way. And I see Katrine just ask, what do you mean by discipline? And so we're going to talk about that. And I remember years and years ago, I was at a group, a shamanic group, and we worked with the spirit of discipline. And in the beginning of that day, I thought, well, that's kind of not so interesting to work with discipline. And by the end, it was so beautiful. They taught me so much about the deeper meanings of discipline. And I came to see the connection between being a disciple and discipline. And so discipline for me became a sort of joyful practice where I'm aware of what I'm doing. I have made a commitment to work in a certain way. And I also make a commitment to it as a path that I'm learning on. And so that's why we often say in the beginning, it's good to find a human teacher that can guide you along the way. There are a lot of people teaching shamanism now, and it means so many different things. That word is so overused now. I almost don't know if we can even talk about it anymore. We like to talk about the spirits rather than shamanism. And so for me, like I said, there are sort of three ingredients in terms of building this relationship with the spirits so that you can begin to trust them. And I'm talking now, not later on when you already have an established relationship, but in the beginning. I feel like one thing is you and your intention, your attitude when you come to the spirits. Another thing is the spirits, they're part of the work. And then your human teacher, and then the circle that you're in. And so for us, when we teach introductory workshops, it's really important to make a good circle, make a good space for the spirits. It's really important for us as teachers to know what our intention is with teaching the course, and to have, I like to think of it as having a clean heart with the work. For me, in the work I do with my spirits, they teach me that when I come to the work with a clean heart, then I can really trust them. And for me, what does a clean heart mean? It means that I'm not trying to control other people. I'm not trying to manipulate other people. I'm not trying to threaten other people. It means that everything I do comes from a good hearted and clean place where I am opening to the magic of the universe. And many years ago, I was going through a very hard time personally. A dear friend of mine was dying, and I had done so much work with the spirits to try and see if we could help him to stay in life a little longer. And it was not to be, it was his time to go. And it was a beautiful, beautiful leaving. It was absolutely beautiful. And I learned so much, and it was so loving. But afterwards, for quite a while, I felt very angry with the spirits that they had not fixed this, they had not kept this person alive. And I went through quite a few months of really having a shaky relationship with my spirits, because I felt, well, how can I trust you if we did this work and it didn't fix it? And again, like I was saying earlier, I remembered enough to know that this too is something to keep working with and to keep learning more and to open my heart even more to the spirits, because I do trust them. And then they showed me as I was working with them that when I work with them, it doesn't mean that life is going to be easy, but it does mean that life is going to be good. When I realized that, my life with them is not about them making my life easy or pain-free, but it is about making it really good in a very deep way.
And of course, then somebody might be writing on the little remarks over here, what is a good life, right? And this is a wonderful question, but for me, a good life is a life with power. And again, I go back to this word, craft, energy, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean physical energy, but it means being able to step into life. And I came to realize some years ago that it's not a question about good and evil. It's a question about love and fear. This is how I've come to see it, and I'm expecting that eventually I'll get a deeper teaching that will take me further. But for right now, I'm still working with the many ins and outs of the relationship of love and fear. And fear leads us to want to control everything. And love leads us to want to experience life. And sometimes life is difficult. We're alive and anything can happen. And if we face anything feeling alone, it's not easy. If we face anything knowing that we have our spirits walking beside us, then we can step into what could be fear.
And find love.
And find love. Exactly. Exactly.
So do you want to say a little more about what you mean by working with the spirits in a disciplined way?
Yeah. And it's interesting because it starts with yourself, myself, right? And realizing that there's more to life than the way I am living it. And that more is not going to be satisfied by a new car or a new bottle of whiskey or something material. It's going to be about stepping into life, right? And in many cases, stepping through fear. And once we realize that we want to do more with life while we have it, goodness knows, we never know when it's going to end. So why not start now? Right? And the shaman works by asking for help. And the shaman asks the spirits for help. And sometimes my teacher tells me things that I don't really like to hear. I think, no, wait a minute, that's not really me, you know, that's not really me. That's my ego, my little fearful Jonathan speaking up. Oh, that's not me. I can't do that. No. And then my teacher, he just looks at me and says, do you want to live? And he's not talking about having me slip on a banana peel and break my neck. He's talking about living. And living is different for each one of us. But when we're working together with our spirits, they will help us to step into life. And sometimes the first step is the hardest. And then the next 75 steps after that, we wonder, why the hell did I take that first step? It's just changed everything. I have no idea what's going on now. Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
And so the discipline is staying with it, staying with life, not just falling back at 2 o'clock in the afternoon instead of 8 o'clock at night when you've been working hard all day. Stepping into life, that's what it's about.
And for me, there are a few, shall we say, practical things that really help with the discipline as well. And once you've started this work, and maybe you've been on a course and you take it home, and also in any circle. And so one thing is about creating sacred space. And whether you're in a big ceremony or whether you're just you at home, maybe you don't even know your spirits, but you can create sacred space through your intention. And I like to say that for me, I like to keep things simple. We both like to keep things pretty simple and grounded.
Simple is good.
Simple is good.
Yeah.
So for me, there are 3 basic things that are really good ingredients for any piece of shamanic work. And one is intention, one is connection, and one is attention. I'll just write those down: intention, connection, and attention. And that for me is the heart of the work. And that I always remember I have to have all of those 3 things for a piece of spirit work to be good. Whether I'm doing it for myself or for other people, it doesn't really matter. So the intention is, we always create a clear intention for any piece of work, whether that's a personal journey, a ceremony with a community, or healing work for somebody. There's always a very clear intention. And we take time to feel in our heart and often talk with each other about forming the intention. So the intention sort of grows out of the heart, and by listening to it and feeling it and finding the right words in a very short and kind of focused way, this is already a step further before you go into the spirit work than you were when you started, because you've made your part of the bargain clearer and cleaner and more present. So you have a clear intention about the whole piece of work, and you stand by that intention. You take responsibility for bringing that intention to the spirits. And then once you feel like you have the intention for the work clear, then you begin to create the connection. Now, if you've been on a training or you've been taught by somebody, there are different ways to create connection, and we'll come back to those in a little while. whether it's with the drum, the rattle, the song, the dance, or other ways to shift consciousness, you begin to connect. And I feel that I have my intention as I step into the piece of spirit work, I have to be able to connect. I cannot do it without my spirits, and I will not do it without them, because then it is not shamanic work, then it's something else. And I work on that. I mean, I work on that constantly. Even after 15 years, I work on my connection. I work on deepening my connection and making it clearer so that I can trust them. So it's not like a been there, done that kind of thing. As you work, it's like anything, you practice, it gets deeper. I keep my connection clear and strong. And then as the piece of work unfolds, I pay attention. I bring my full presence to the work with intention and connection. And I bring my attention. So it's not me controlling it or pushing it or saying where it's to go. I'm not telling the spirits what to do. They know so much more than I do. I'm paying attention and following their lead. And then at some time, the piece of work is over. Maybe the drumming has come to a stop. The ceremony is over. The healing has been done for now. And then I take time to sort of step out of the threshold. And the last thing in the piece of disciplined work is to give thanks. We always give thanks to the spirits afterwards. And that helps to sort of round it off, but it also helps us remember that it's just amazing what they give us all the time. And I find working with those things, it makes any piece of work very clear and very well held, and it creates the sacred space, helps to maintain the sacred space. So for us, we're not working with any indigenous tradition as such. We're teaching people how to just really come into direct contact and relationship with the spirits. So we don't teach very complex ceremonies that belong in other cultures. We just help people to create this direct connection and then begin to understand the language of the spirits, what they're actually telling you and showing you. And I find that this is a very good way, a very simple way, a very clear and direct way.
Right. A few minutes ago, one of you asked a question. I can't remember exactly how it was phrased, but it was basically, how do you know that you can trust the spirits who come to you? And I think, Zara was getting in on this. A lot of it has to do with this formulating of the intention. What is your intention? And if your intention is clean, then my experience has been 100% that I don't have to worry about the guidance or the information that I receive. That can be a very big if, right? If life has put you into a difficult situation, a really hard place, between a rock and a hard place, they like to say in America. I love that one. But if you're in a place like that, then it's very easy just to get me out of here. I don't care how you guys do it, but get me out of here, right? And I remember one time, years and years and years ago, very close to the beginning of my shamanic career, I had a terrible neighbor, and like I was ready to kill this guy, you know, and it was because he was sort of getting up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd get back from work at 10 o'clock at night and need some sleep, you know, and he had his stereo blasting. You know the story. I'm sure a lot of you have experienced this. And so I was at the end of the rope. And so I said to my spirits, we got to do something about this guy. And my spirits, they said to me, you don't want to hurt him. Fortunately, by then, we'd really established a good relationship. And I had really surrendered to them. I recognized them as knowing more than I do. I recognize my spirits as having my best interests at heart and having a much wider perspective than I could begin to have. So after the third time, they said to me, "You don't want to hurt him." I surrendered. Okay, okay, we don't want to hurt him. What are we going to do? And then they outlined a procedure, and I followed this procedure, and it turned out to be this wonderful win-win situation where he moved away and moved to a much better place. So just it's a lot about trust and intention.
And one of our absolute rules is that you reminded me of with this story is to only ever ask for help for yourself or for people who come to you asking for help. So we never ever work with the spirits to get what we want. And this is also what I mean about keeping a clean heart. You know, and it's something that builds up. I remember you used to say, if you want to play games with the spirits, they'll play games, but they're much better at it.
Well, they know the rules.
Yeah,
you know, we have no idea.
Yeah.
We have no idea what the rules are.
But if I have a clean heart and I'm really asking for help for myself, I'm not trying to create and change situations around me, outside of me, to be better or the way I like them to be, right? It's more about how do I respond to the world? Help me. So if, for instance, there might be a situation I'm having a great difficulty with a relationship in my family or a friend, I don't go and say, please fix that person so they're more the way I want them to be. Instead, I ask for help for myself for this relationship. And that's where the magic is for me, because suddenly it's not about, we like to say that, you know, it's not a shamanic supermarket. You don't get in and get what you want and then get out. It's a much bigger spiritual practice for us, where you step into life and you surrender to a life, to a real, full, soulful, rich life. And that means that maybe you don't get what you want, but as you like to say, you get what you need. And that is often so much more nourishing and so much more exciting when we actually begin to recognize that what we need is not always what we want.
And in fact, generally, once we accept what we need, we realize that that's what we really do want. That's the wonderful gift there. It's a really wonderful question here from John King. I just happened to
it's a great one.
Read that, and I haven't been reading the question so much because I'm a slow reader. But John asks, what advice do you give when a student has doubts as to whether their connections are genuine or imagined? And this is really
classic question.
Classic question.
Such a great one.
Yeah. Give up. No. I'm only kidding. Don't give up at all. But what I generally go into a long talk about what is imagination, right? And so this is something that I would invite you to consider, John. What is imagination? What is your imagination? Where is that coming from? Is it really coming from you? So another thing that I generally say is, in any case, trust your imagination. Now I'm talking about if you are making a journey, you have clear connection with your spirits, and they tell you something, and oh my God, maybe it's something you actually want to hear, right? Like, quit your job, you know? But that's what I want to do. Wonderful. Go ahead and do it, right? So trust your imagination. So what if it is your inner voice, whatever that is, that means that's what your heart is begging you to do. Leave that job. Tell her you love her, you know, whatever. Trust and trust. And then, like maybe something really cataclysmic happens because you do trust and you follow what you thought was your imagination, right? And as I said in the beginning, uh, sometimes following the initiation does not just automatically put you in front of a beautiful plate of ice cream, right? Maybe it seems like it puts you in hell, right? But that's only the beginning. That's only the beginning. Trust it. Ask for help. Keep on going.
I think I love this question about how do I know if I'm making it all up?
Mm.
And it's a question we hear a lot. And I want to say a bit more about that as well, because I think it's so fundamental. And like most things, there are several different answers, and I love that. And one thing is that in our culture here, and certainly our culture that I've grown up with in this so-called Western, so-called developed world, many people have lost connection to their imagination, right? And we are encouraged to believe that imagination equals make-believe, that imagination is something fun that children do, and but it's not really true. And so we grow up not trusting our imaginations, like you said. Now, I work a lot with creativity and story and writing, and so for 25 plus years, I've really worked with my imagination. I've worked with connecting to it, communicating with it, and trusting it and valuing it. And I see it as a brilliant tool. That doesn't mean that I feel that I'm making things up. For me, what I've come to feel is that the imagination is sort of a meeting place between the human and the spirit, a playground, if you like. So it's like, here is my humanness, and here is the spirit consciousness. And it's almost like stepping through the layer of imagination allows me to start expanding so that I will begin to really hear what the spirits are saying. And so sometimes I feel really inspired, from connecting with the spirits. And I think, is this idea coming from them, or is it coming from me? And I like to call that inspiritation. And because they inspire me. And so who knows sometimes if it's me or them, but it's a brilliant idea, right? So trust that, trust if it feels right or not. So I think that's one thing about really learning what it means to have imagination as something that's sacred and valuable. And in the beginning, my understanding of all art is that in the beginning, all art was a way to communicate with the spirits. It was sacred: music, dance, storytelling, and some kind of visual art, painting, rock art. It was all ways to communicate with the spirits in a ceremonial, sacred way. And just one more thing. So that's one thing. It's like really valuing that as a kind of a springboard. See the imagination as a springboard that sort of limbers you up and gets you ready to talk to the spirits. Now, there's one other thing in this question about how do I know if I'm making it up? And that again comes back to, what is your intention, and do you have a clean heart with it? Because if you go into a piece of work and what you really want is that answer, and you're not really going to settle unless you get that answer, maybe you do kind of push it that way. And the human mind and the human consciousness and the human soul is an amazing thing, really, especially when we're in tandem with the spirits. And there's a lot of things in terms of that, of how consciousness can really mix, because we're mixing the human consciousness with spirit consciousness. We're coming together and doing this work together. So when you do have this question, am I making it up? Think about, am I open to receiving any answer? Or am I basically only going to settle for one thing? And of course, I have a wish in my heart with my intention. But then once I've stepped into the intention, I trust my spirits and I want them to show me their perspective, what they see.
Yeah, I generally say that imagination is the spirits whispering in my ear. And so we've just gotten a message from Hannah Lee here, which is really very interesting. And for her, it's impossible to imagine, so that when she journeys, she's right in it. It's right there, and it's really real. But that's a blessing, Hannah Lee, and not everybody has that. But I really do feel that this imagination is the spirits whispering in my ear. And uh, I think that when we really want to, uh, as some people refer to it, as manipulating a journey, uh, I think that we know we're doing it. I know that I do. And my teacher always laughs at me and he calls me on it. And then, there I am with my pants down. And so I just got to trust him, right? So work with it a little while, John, and try to think about these things we've been saying. And as Zara said in the beginning, we're going to put this one online one way or the other so you can go back and listen to this conversation again. Hope it's been helpful.
I want to go on to this question from Ursa about what about when spirits come to you, maybe uninvited, and she says, and try to convince you to leave your body and go with them. What is their intention? And this can certainly happen. And this might be the spirit's way of getting your attention and saying, hey, you should be working with us. But this goes back to what we're saying, working with discipline. And if that should happen, then we suggest finding a teacher, a human teacher in some form that can help you to find a good disciplined way and setting up some boundaries. But the general idea is that they want to get your attention. So then you have to learn to say, okay, how can I begin to work with them in a way that still has boundaries? Because what we like to say is this is shamanism, not escapism. So you want to work in a way that's still very grounded.
And this, of course, is it can be a very terrifying experience that you're talking about. And definitely find somebody, a shamanic counselor, for example, who can help you to work with this. Because I really want to back up what Zara's saying here. This is an offer. This is an offer which can change your life. But again, this is this word discipline coming in. And when you finally do learn how to dance with the spirits who are coming to you, it will give you so much more. And right now, I can really understand how it is kind of a scary thing. But get help to work together with the spirits. This is classic out of the ethnographies. And some people, when I was studying anthropology, I read about people who just did not want to do this at all because they felt they knew the responsibility, the huge responsibility in the tribal setting. And they didn't want that responsibility. They were very happy gathering berries and firewood or going out hunting or whatever they did. They didn't want this. So that's a whole other story. But find somebody to help you with this and turn these frightening experiences into experiences of power.
And for me, myself, my overall intention with this work, for me personally, not in terms of helping others, well, actually, it's the same, is that I think being here on this earth is such an amazing opportunity, and being in this kind of life, life on earth, is just an amazing opportunity. And the more I work and the older I get, I just think it's more and more amazing. And for me personally, what helped in the first 5 years was I got a lot of healing and soul retrieval. And so the more I came home to myself and the more I kind of filled up, the more I was here, the more I could feel alive here on this earth. And I didn't want to leave like I did before. I didn't want to be somewhere else. And for me, that is really the key intention with this work, is to be alive here now on the earth together with the spirits. So not just in a physical matter way, but together with the spirits.
Right, and I'd like to get to John again, who asked the question about imagination before, and he's right. So it's all about trust, is it? And I would say trust has a lot to do with it. And I think that when I look back to the first half of my life, I had often a very difficult time trusting life. And that made life very difficult for me. But once I started working together with my spirits, then I started really trusting life on a very deep level. And for me, trust is a key word in shamanic practice.
And I want to build on that, come to this question from Nicole about, are there any suggestions or exercises you have for deepening your connection with the spirits?
Mm-hmm.
And there are many, and this is the heart of the work, deepening our connection with the spirits.
This is the practice. In fact, the practice of shamanism is deepening your connection with your spirits. I started off talking about shamanism being connection, and this is it. This is really, really it. And so one thing that I advise, we've been talking about having a clear intention, okay? There are certain questions that you can maybe think have a very clear intention, but I feel strongly will get you nowhere. And one of these questions is, what shall I do with the rest of my life? Right.
Or why is this happening?
Well, I'm just going to stick with what shall I do with the rest of my life for right now. I never ask why. I never ask why. Zara sometimes will ask why, but I never ask why. Okay? Because I will find out. And there are other ways of finding out. But if you ask what or how, these questions will take you further. And so instead of asking, what shall I do with the rest of my life, or what is most important for me in my life, start with now. Start with now. The rest of your life might be 3 days, 4 hours, and 27 minutes. You have no idea. So, what's going on in your life right now? Work with that. Ask questions about your life right now and consider the answers. Consider the answers and work with your journeys. This is another thing. You don't deepen your connection with your spirits by turning into a journey junkie. I remember in the beginning of my shamanic career, this one guy was telling me, so I journeyed to my spirits and asked them what I should have for lunch. I thought, what? Come on, get serious. You can decide that for yourself, right? Maybe ask, what is a good diet for me at this point in my life? That's another question, right? Be prepared for the answer. Be prepared for the answer.
And what I like about this question about how to deepen your connection with your spirits, if you've been introduced, a good thing. I want to get also to a little bit about where to start, but is for me, it is a practice. We run these regular days for people who live not so far away, when we can meet, called shamanic practice days or shamanic practice weekends. And it reminds me that this is a practice. I practice it regularly. I make space for the spirits in my life. And I like to think of it like I used to have a friend that I still have, and I really love her. She's great. But there was a phase in our relationship, our friendship, where she would only ever phone me up because she wanted something. And usually that was a pretty interesting thing she wanted, it was not horrible. But I thought, oh, I wish you'd just phone me up just to have a chat sometimes. And then I realized it's the same with me and the spirits. There was a point where I would only go as like, oh, I need help or somebody else needs help. And that's a very fine thing. And amazingly, they show up all the time, all the time. I just can't believe how much they show up. Because I really feel that they really want us to live a good life here, a full life, a rich life. But they started teaching me things. One of the things we do on a course is to ask for a regular ritual that I can do that will help me to deepen my connection. And it might be something as simple as drinking a glass of water with intention and awareness and connection.
First thing in the morning.
Yeah, it's a very good thing. And so each of you, you can ask about that or do what feels, if it feels right, try it out. Try it out for a week or for 2 months or for 3 years or forever. And it's amazing. I remember once years ago, they said I had a drum. I still have a drum, this wonderful drum, my first drum. And they said, okay, now for about a year or 2 years, you're just going to go out and drum every day. But you're not going to do it as a piece of work. You're just going to do it to get to know the drum and the spirit of the drum. And I thought, okay. And it was amazing. It changed my life. And me and that drum are like super tight. And I really trust that drum because, of course, everything is alive. So a drum, a rattle, they all have spirits. And so now when I work with that drum, I've worked with that drum in many ceremonies. I trust it so much because I just made space for it in my life. I went out not to achieve anything, not to try and get anything, just to spend time together. So that is one thing. And wonderful, if you know how to journey, then wonderful journey suggestions, like maybe a few times a year, is just to journey to the spirits to say, what can I do for you? Or how can I thank you for all that you've given me? Or what's the next step in deepening my relationship for you? So it's just making room and space for that.
Yeah, I think this should be enough to keep you busy for a little while.
Yeah.
I also wanted to come back to something that Zara touched on a little bit earlier, and that is that my experience in working together with people on a one-to-one basis is a lot of people come to me because they might be having trouble in a relationship, and I don't think that any of us are foreign to this issue, whether that relationship is with a partner or a family member, boss, right? And of course, they are the ones where, that's where the trouble is. It's nothing to do with you. I know this is true. But anyway, a very good way to get into working deeply with relationship issues is to say, for example, what can I do to be a better father? Right. Okay, so your teenage son is a mess, right? He's not doing well in school. He's hanging out with a crowd that you think is terrible, all kinds of things like that. Wait a minute. What can you do to be a better father? You know, what can you do to be a better son? How can you be a better employee?
How can you stay in touch in with your power when you go into work?
That's also a very good one.
Mm.
I did that one time when I was going to the hospital for major surgery, right?
How can I stay in power while I'm in
While I'm
hospital?
in the
Mm.
hospital.
It was amazing.
And it was amazing.
Mm.
And I had an amazing time in the hospital. And I really, I was having, I was so lucky. You know, I was really lucky. My spirits were taking such good care of me. And so was everyone else. Yeah.
I want to just respond briefly to Amber talking about a drum that once called to you in a charity shop window and you didn't buy it. Think about it still. And this is lovely. And I just want to say that remember that in shamanic work, we said at the beginning, it's both spirit and matter together. It's not only spirit, because we are here in bodies on this earth. So for me, shamanic life on this earth is about learning how spirit and matter dance together. When I leave my body, then I'm going to go off and do other spirit stuff. But right now, it's about spirit and matter together. So if you feel like something happened in physical life and I missed my chance, remember that you can do a little ceremony now, a very simple ceremony, whether you know how to journey or not, doesn't matter. You can just do a little thanksgiving ceremony to that drum. You can sit down, light a candle, and just speak out loud. I find speaking out loud from the heart wonderful, very simple thing to do. And just say, drum, and like maybe picture it in your mind. Drum, I thank you. I saw you. I heard you. I didn't know at the time how to respond, but I've never forgotten you. And I thank you so much for calling me. And I hear the call and thank you. And then maybe that's it. You just sit with it for a while, you blow out the candle. Remember, we are never limited in shamanic work only by physical reality. And time and space is very different. So you can always do a ceremony or ask for help and give thanks.
And another suggestion, I'm not making any promises here, is to try to journey to that drum.
Mm.
And if you're so lucky as to find that drum and have the opportunity to work with it in the spirit world, maybe that's even better.
Mm.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of something I really want to say, which is that when we do work with intention, and like we said at the beginning, you step into a piece of work with your own intention, and you've got a clean heart with that work, and you've said, yes, this is what my intention is. I feel that I take responsibility for that. And so, because this can be really amazing, powerful work, take responsibility for what you're asking for. We really do not recommend what we call kind of like shamanic tourism, that you just go into a journey to have a look around because you're kind of interested. We really always suggest that you go with an intention that's real and meaningful to you. It doesn't have to be huge, you know. It can be asking for help to pass my driving license, my driving test, but it should be real and meaningful to you. And I find that when we do that, when we ask for help or ask for advice from a real place, then the spirits really respond. If we start going in and we just want to look around and, you know, kind of have a cool experience, it's a different situation.
And if you are curious and just want to look around, if you really feel it in your heart, as Zara was saying, you can go to the spirits just to thank them for bringing you to this point in your life.
Mm.
That's a miracle. We all have 100 opportunities every day to die. Right? Somebody's looking out for us. And so uh, thank you
Mm.
from the depth of your heart.
Mm.
That goes a long way.
Mm.
And you'll have one very interesting experience as well.
We want to talk a little bit about shifting consciousness, because that is absolutely key to shamanic work. And we're going to go on a little while longer. So if any of you have to leave, please just go ahead. But we're going to go on talking for a little longer because we have a couple more things we really want to say. And so there are different ways of shifting consciousness. And Jonathan's going to talk about them very soon. But what I want to say is shifting consciousness doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as going into a trance. So you can talk a bit about that maybe.
Yeah. Shifting consciousness, that means that you still have consciousness, right? It's just a different consciousness. So the first time I experienced the spirit world that I was aware of, everything looked the same, except there were a lot of people in it that I had never seen before in my life. And they did strange things and came out of places unexpected, like stones and trees. And at the same time, I was totally conscious all the time. And so there are a lot of different ways of shifting consciousness, as I mentioned in the beginning. And a lot of traditions use very powerful psychotropic plants and drugs. And I do not recommend this. And I know a lot of you are going to ignore my recommendation. And so I would say, if you are going to do this, if you have to do this, then do it together with somebody who really knows what they're doing, and someone who has been personally recommended to you, not someone you see in newspaper advertisement.
And I want to say just one more thing before you carry on about shifting consciousness, which is that there are many traditions that work with plant medicine. And the key to a lot of that medicine is a long relationship between shaman and plant. The plant is alive, the spirit of the plant is alive. And there is a long relationship where you learn how the plant wants to work with you. Not how you want to work with the plant, but how the plant wants to work with you. And you give back in a lot of different ways. And so this is a very different way to approach the work than just to want to go and have an experience. And that's something to really bear in mind if you want to work. I know with plants, and there are also other ways to work with plants. We do a lot of plant work, but it's not ingesting the plant. It's meeting the spirit of the plant simply by going out and working with intention, connection, and awareness. And part of the reason why we don't work with psychotropics on our courses is because we feel that it's not necessary. And what I really love, personally, I work a lot with the drum, I work a lot with song, and you work a lot with a rattle. And they're so simple. You always have them with you. Even if you don't physically have your rattle, you have your spirit rattle. I love to work with song because it's right there and it helps me to shift consciousness and connect immediately. And it's not, like Jonathan said, it's not that I go into a trance, it's just that all of my senses, including my spirit senses, widen and get much, much more attuned and connected and aware. And then I can begin to not even see, but sense what the spirits are trying to show me. And so I feel that plant medicine definitely has such a part to play, but in a way, in this consumerist society, it's kind of gone, it's become the way because it's something we can take, it's something we can consume. You don't have to have a long-standing practice, you know. You just take it and you have a very powerful experience, and that can be very healing. But if you want to get into having a regular, solid practice, there's so much you can do simply by going out, asking for help, making space for them, having a regular small ritual, and learning how to shift consciousness in other very simple ways.
Yes. When I was younger, so much younger than today, to quote the Beatles, I never needed anyone's help in any way. That's how the song goes, right? And so I didn't ask for help. But the shaman's way is to ask for help. Now, I know that there are a lot of very beautiful traditions that do involve teaching plants, as they say. And as Zara was saying, from our point of view, every plant is a teaching plant. But generally, when people talking about teaching plants, they mean ones that take you someplace very powerfully. And there, as I said, are a lot of beautiful traditions, but I've also known a lot of people who have gotten in trouble. And so I had the wonderful pleasure of getting out of the army in 1966. And for those of you who are around in 1966, you know what that means. Flower power, right? And I was right there, right in it. And it was just what I needed after 2 years in the army and 8 months in Vietnam. And it was very healing for me. And I tried just about everything I could get my hands on. And then one day I had this experience that I just mentioned. And after that, I knew no more drugs. Because I had really stepped into the spirit world. And it was a very beautiful and pure experience. And I also knew that the person that I did it together with did not have a very beautiful experience. He had a terrible experience. And in the years since then, I've met a lot of people who were not lucky. My spirits are watching out for me. So I don't do this. I don't recommend it for anyone. And as Zara just said, it's totally unnecessary. And we have a wonderful website with a lot of articles and some videos like this. And you can learn a lot there. You can learn from other people's experience. This is part of what it means to have the gift of intelligence. It's possible to learn from other people's experience, but we have to have our own experiences. So going back to what Zara said earlier, if you don't have a teacher, find one. Ask your friends, do you know a good teacher? Right? Try to get a personal recommendation.
And there was a question earlier about how to find a good teacher. And it's very personal. People have very different teaching styles. There are a lot of different traditions. But I feel, for me personally, a good teacher should be able to hold space very well and have an intention of working for the whole, not for themselves. And those are basically my two tenets, and then how that feels to each of you will feel different. And I also want to add that often we talk about the shaman as having one foot in each world, one foot in the spirit world and one foot in the physical world. And by doing this, the shaman becomes the bridge, And so the shaman goes to the spirit world and brings back the information, the power, the help, the healing for the community, for the whole. And that's why we often say that the shamans are servants of the spirits, but also the servants of the community. And so that's kind of a interesting dance to have one foot in each world. And that's, again, something that comes with experience. It comes with practice. Often, people do one course or practice for a couple of years and then nothing much is happening. Traditionally, somebody might be the apprentice of a shaman for 30 years and only step into the role of a shaman after their teacher had passed on and passed that over to them. So again, as I was saying in the beginning, try not to think of it as like, am I or am I not a shaman? Think about, am I living a soulful life? Am I living a life where I want to touch not only physical matter, but spirit and everything? I want to open and I want to receive my soul home. I think a lot of people go out seeking because they feel that they're not quite home, they're not quite whole. And in a few weeks, we're going to do one of these free talks about shamanic healing, and we'll talk more about that then. But it's very interesting, this thing about being the bridge, and really remembering that it's based on a way of practicing and a way of being. And one of the things that's really, I think, is particularly special about you, Jonathan, the way you teach, or the way we teach now, is that we don't really teach shamanism as a set of techniques, but as a spiritual practice.
Yeah. And techniques are wonderful, but you can really get caught up with them. And I tend to look at techniques as being like the key to the doorway to the house of the spirits, right? But it's not the threshold which you stride over to enter the house of the spirits. And the techniques are certainly not the spirit. Right? And there's this wonderful book, if you don't know it, Mircea Eliade's book, Shamanism, Archaic Techniques in Ecstasy. It's a wonderful title. And he was stuck on the techniques. But actually, if you just know one technique that works, that's enough. That's enough.
Yeah, and I really like this. You said the technique is the key to the doorway of the house of the spirits. It lets you in, and I know sometimes people get kind of blinded, I feel, almost by amazing looking ceremonies or amazing looking shamans' costumes or an array of shamanic tools, and it looks so impressive. And again, this is looking at the surface. And so what is a shaman? A shaman is someone who has a very deep connection to the spirits and uses that work for the healing and health of their community. It's not somebody who looks a certain way or does a certain type of ceremony. It's someone who works together with the spirit in partnership for the good of the whole.
Some years ago, there was a book and also a movie. I think it was called The Horse Boy. I think it was about some parents who had a child who had some very severe issues, and they ended up going to Siberia to meet a shaman.
I think it was Mongolia.
Mongolia, and in the hopes that the shaman would be able to help their son. And in the movie, I never forget when they finally got to the shaman. Here was this old guy, I guess, 70 years old, and he was wearing a nylon windbreaker and a baseball cap, right? And he was clearly a shaman, you know. And it was beautiful. It was really, really wonderful. So again, please don't get caught up with the superficialities. It's wonderful when your spirits give you something to wear. Right? This is great.
But it's not how it looks,
But
it's the power it brings.
it's the power. It's the power of it.
Mm.
And if one time you're caught in an emergency and your beautiful shamanic costume is, 50 miles away in your apartment, call the power to you. Call the power of that costume to you and wear the spirit of it. That's shamanism.
And a really good place to start, if you can't go on a course or you can't find a teacher, a really good place to start is to walk out in nature. And we're going to talk about Ludwig Bertalan's wonderful question in a minute, is to go out in nature and just ask for help to feel more at home on the earth. And just go for a walk and just feel that that wish in your heart as a real and meaningful wish. I'm asking for help to feel more at home on the earth. It's a wonderful place to start. And we work a lot with the spirits of nature. And again, we're going to be offering some more work during the summer about this. And there is this wonderful question about feeling that there is so much destruction now in life, and there's certainly the media and the news is very focused on bad news, shall we say. There's also some really amazing places that really focus on solutions and positive news, and it's good to find those places and create a balance for yourself. So
I would like to just mention in passing, I don't know where you're located, Luffy, but in Hungary, there's a magazine called Yes Magazine with an exclamation mark after it that's out of America, and one out of England called Positive News, and another one out of England that's called Resurgence and the Ecologist. That's the name of the magazine. And we can
you can sign up for free newsletters,
right?
So it's Yes Magazine, positive news and resurgence. And the reason why we mention that is that it also helps to reconnect you to what are you receiving, what are you taking in. And this is not denying the situation that's going on, but it's balancing it with power, with possibility, with hope. And so in your question, you say you feel that almost that you feel almost hurt by this real all the difficulty of the news. Of course, it makes you feel like a part of you is almost leaving. If it's pushing
it's
down.
Terrible. It's terrible. It's so hard.
And there are wonderful ways to call back power. And one, as I said just a little while ago, is to go out in nature and ask, how can I feel more at home on the earth? Because whatever else is going on, there is also that. There is also our direct connection with the earth. And our experience is that the earth is still very strong and really wants to work together with humans to create healing power and healing change. Mm-hmm. And so the answer is indeed to connect and ask for help. And don't expect that the pain will go away, but expect that you will have enough power to deal with the pain in a healing way.
And not only that, it's important to realize that you can do what you can do, and you cannot do any more than what you can do. Right? And that it's very important that you do what you can do. right? But don't try to do what you can't do. This will only lead to deeper frustration. So start with yourself. Just as Zara was saying, go out into the forest, meet a beautiful tree who will tell you what your first steps could be, for example, or make a journey and ask, what is my first step in living a new life in this world today? What is my first step? And then there are ways of carrying on from that as well. Another good thing is that we put these magazines up here because they are filled with people who are doing incredible things, and they all started off very simply, taking that first step. And remember, we're talking about shamanism, right? Ask your spirits for help. Ask your spirits for help. And if you don't know your spirits yet, in fact, I know some people in Hungary I can recommend to you. Really wonderful people, great teachers, lovely human beings who will help you to feel good about being a human being on this earth today.
One thing that really helps me is to remember that at the heart of pain is love. I only feel the pain because I love the earth, because I love life, because I love that person. So try to bear the pain so you can touch the love that's at the heart of it. And start from that place of like reconnecting to your love for the earth. That is a very powerful place. And when we get help and support from the spirits, we don't have to turn the pain off because we get so filled with power and the power of love that we can actually go out and really live life. And on our website, we have a wonderful talk, I feel, about the power of love and shamanic practice on our library page. So please have a look at that as well and really connect with the power of love.
It's all about love.
Yeah.
It's all about love. And the love that's awakening the pain in your heart. That's power. That's power. And it's trying to waken you up. Right? And so that you can step into that love, recognize it, and let it carry you to do the things that you can do. And maybe after 4 or 5 years, when you look back on tonight and you think, oh, my life is not quite the same. It's because of the love.
So we are going to finish our talk for tonight there. We are going to do a little closing ceremony now. And then we have, once we've done the closing ceremony, we'll stop the recording. And then if you want at that point to put your video back on and say, I am by, that'd be wonderful. But just keep it off for now. And we'll also be posting this recording on our YouTube channel, which is Shaman Center Circle. So if you go to YouTube and look for Shaman Center Circle, that's our YouTube channel. It's pretty new, only has a few things in it, but it will have oh, sorry, to everybody. Yeah, send it to everybody. So just keep checking into that. So, but before we do that, I just want to do a little closing ceremony, very short. And again, I just invite you to take a breath. You can close your eyes if you like and feel yourself here now. At the beginning, we invited you to just arrive into the moment, into your body. And so feel yourself here now after our time together in circle. And feel yourself sitting in circle, together with so many other human beings who really want to be alive on this earth at this time and be full human beings, bring their soul to the world. And I want to thank all of you who have sat with us in circle. And I want to thank all the spirits that were here and all the spirits that are always here, the ancestors, the nature spirits, and all the spirits that are yet to come as teachers and helpers and guides. We thank you because without you, we do nothing. Without you, we can't do this work. And with you, we are together. With you, we have the possibility for connection, power, and a very full, soulful life. So thank you. Thank you very much to all of you, and thank you to the spirits. And we hope to see you again.